Measuring volleyball performance isn't just about counting jumps. Wondering why? Let's find out. And with that, welcome back to another episode of the Xtra Edge, a KINEXON Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Philipp Lienemann. And today we go behind the scenes at Texas A&M with Scott Battley, Assistant Athletics Director and Director of Sports Science. Scott oversees Olympic sports services and the performance and wellness units. He directly supports baseball, men's and women's golf, equestrian, and volleyball programs. He also leads the sports science staff, including PhD fellowships and internships, developing students from Texas A&M and beyond. Before joining Olympic sports, he served as an assistant sports scientist with the football program. Coming off a historic season where the Aggies just won their first national volleyball title, Scott takes us behind the scenes of building a high-performance sports science system at a major NCAA program. We discuss his three foundational pillars for success: the right people, strong normative data and athlete profiles, and proactive plans with feedback loops that guide training throughout the season. Scott also shares his perspective on competitive success, talent, availability, and readiness to perform, and how monitoring, staff collaboration, and continuous learning give student athletes their best chance to succeed. Volleyball isn't just about how many jumps you do. It's about the type of jumps, the loads they place on the body, and the context of each action. That's where KINEXON's Perform IMU comes in. With Perform IMU, staff get objective, inertial data anywhere without any infrastructure required. You can build true normative data and position-specific athlete profiles instead of relying on a one-catch-all load number. The Perform IMU doesn't just count jumps. They are classified and characterized, identifying single versus repeated efforts, quantifying jump height and intensity, and capturing mechanical stress, accelerations, decelerations, and approach speed. An outside hitter's jump load looks different from a libero's change of direction volume. And with the help of the Perform IMU, your training periodization can reflect those realities. The result? More sport and position-specific baselines, clearer readiness trends, and actionable feedback loops. If you're ready to take your program beyond simple jump counts, this episode is packed with actionable insights from one of the leaders in collegiate sports science. To learn more or see a demo, visit our website, kinexon-sports.com, or follow us on Instagram, YouTube, and LinkedIn using our handle @KINEXON Sports. And now, let's dive into my conversation with Scott Battley. Thanks everyone for tuning in to another episode of our KINEXON Sports Podcast, the Xtra Edge. I'm very excited to welcome Scott Battley, Assistant Athletics Director and Director of Sports Science, to the show today. Scott, first of all, we didn't talk about it yet, but a bit delayed. Again, congratulations on a fantastic run to the first national championship for Texas A&M Volleyball. I believe in history, right? Not only during your time there, but in history of the program. So what a way to finish the end of last year. How do you feel? And I hope you already had time to celebrate and recover from it.
Yes, we have celebrated, we have recovered, and we are back at it as we speak with positionals right now with a new squad. So really appreciate it. Thanks for having me. But yeah, it's been a really, really fun journey with the volleyball squad. During my time here since 2018 working with them, since Jamie, our new head coach, has been here for the last 3 years to where we are today, it's been a really, really fun journey.
That's awesome too. Yeah, again, congratulations. And hopefully we have a lot of folks listening to this today and hopefully take one or two things with them that they can apply in their program. So maybe, just learn about your role and how you apply different sports science practices. Before we dive further into the practical topics, I would say, can you give us a little bit more insight about your background, your role, how you kind of like grew up with Texas A&M? I saw a couple of things there preparing for this meeting. You also worked in football and other different sports. So curious to learn more about that and yeah, get some more insights from you.
Yeah, been at Aggie for a long time. So I grew up about an hour and a half away from Texas A&M. Came here for my bachelor's. Right after that, went to their master's program in sport physiology, where it was more strength and conditioning kind of focused, and that's what I thought I was really gonna do. Go be a high school strength coach somewhere at that time. But during my time here, that is when the football program actually hired their first two sports scientists. So that'd be 2013, which was Howard Gray and Jake Reed. They were looking for an intern. I somehow got lucky enough that people chose me to be over there. And it was a really, really good experience. I got to learn a lot from those two over there. Didn't know at the time what even sports science was. But they were implementing some things over there that I was able to help out with, got the idea of, hey, what monitoring is, what quantifying what the athletes are doing are. Did that, finished my master's that year, was able to go to the University of Tennessee and work with their football program for a year before a job opened up back at Texas A&M with the football program. So I was able to gain that in 2016. We did that for 2 years before a coaching change happened with our football program. And we were very, very, very blessed to move over from the football side to the Olympic side. So from 2018 forward, I've been on the Olympic side working with these sports. And at that time, they didn't have any sports scientists on staff. So it was really just coming over and being like, hey, what are some people doing from a monitoring standpoint? And how can we help? And actually, one of the first sports I did help out with was volleyball back in 18, where they had a new head coach then. And they had some systems that they had but weren't utilizing, where I just helped out the athletic trainer who was more interested in kind of quantifying how many jumps some of their players were doing in the rehab setting. That it was an easy fix because they already had the technology. So I just could come in and maybe enhance what they were doing a little bit. But that obviously spread to doing more holistic whole team monitoring with that squad from 18 all the way to 22 to where that is when our coach Jamie Morrison came in that spring. And again, very, very lucky for the type of man he is and the way he thinks about some things to where really kind of excelled what we were able to do with that team, and obviously hopefully led to what we were able to do this past year.
Awesome. Yeah. So from what I'm hearing, you're focused primarily on volleyball, but you're responsible for Olympic sports at large. Is that right?
That is correct. So when me and my supervisor, Howard Gray, moved over to the Olympic side, it was just the two of us.
Okay.
And again, at that time, I was a sports scientist. Now, being the director, I oversee our whole unit on the Olympic side. So that includes 2 full-time employees as well as 2 PhD fellows. So those are individuals that are getting their PhD within our kinesiology program, but also embedded in athletics, serving 1, maybe 2 teams as they get their PhD. But overseeing them, as well as I lead volleyball, both golf, our equestrian team, and now I'm going to take over baseball as they go through the spring.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I think for myself too, but also for the European audience, I know we have a couple volleyball teams and KINEXON followers over there too. Like if we hear Olympic sports, I think we don't necessarily always know what sports are included. I also feel when I came to the US, depending on what school or who you're talking with, that includes different teams. So you already mentioned a couple, but are there any other that fall under the umbrellas that some of your colleagues are working with when we talk about Olympic sports, or is that primarily Texas A&M volleyball, Christian, and golf?
No, yeah. So
and
there are many others, and so to me, Olympic sports is, at least in the collegiate setting, everything except football. So football is
Gotcha. Okay.
So for the Olympic side, that would be both men's and women's basketball. For us, we have women's soccer, we have baseball and softball, We have men's tennis, women's tennis. We have men's golf, women's golf. We have track and field. We have swimming and diving. And I think I'm not missing anyone besides equestrian, who we just talked about. So I believe we have a total of 13 to 14 teams, which
Oh,
in college athletics, I think is actually on the smaller end. Some of the other universities have like lacrosse, they have men's soccer, they have a lot of different sports. I would say we're on the lighter side of overall sports. But the sports we have keep us busy. When we spread out again, trying to provide sports science service across 3 to 4 people that we have on staff, we definitely stay busy.
yeah, that's for sure. Yeah. Especially with aligning also all these different schedules, because I would imagine the seasonality of all these different sports is very different. Um, what's the what's the main focus for you when you think about like the sports science support and working with all these different sports, and obviously primarily volleyball as a topic for today, but what are kind of like the outcomes and focus areas that you try to pay most attention towards?
Yeah, I think it's really trying to help others. I think a big principle we have within our unit is trying to be the ultimate assistant. And what we mean that by that is like, how do we help others do their job at a higher level? And that can
Hmm.
be done in a lot of different ways. And a lot of people think sports science is like, oh, you're the technology guy, you're the training load guy, and all that.
Yeah.
I think you can be a lot of different things because we do spread out across all these different disciplines. And to be honest, I think everyone truly is a sports scientist in the heart of like, hey, we're trying to use information to guide decisions. Like if you're working in athletics, everyone's doing that. I think now the role of sports science is being more formalized in college professional sports that, yeah, you do have maybe someone dedicated who can maybe run a technology or perform some type of monitoring, be able to manage that data, analyze that data. But at the end of the day, the biggest thing is how do you interpret that data to people in a very simplistic way, in a fast manner that allows them to, again, do their job. Like, again, I want to help our strength coach when it comes to maybe the assessments we do or some of the things we're doing from a monitoring system. If I can either provide him additional information that helps guide his training of individualizing this player versus this player, that's a win for me. Or if I can take something off his plate or her plate to allow them to either go down a different rabbit hole that they want or have more time to look into this thing, like that's a win as well. But I think that goes across all our different disciplines of, hey, strength and conditioning, we just talked about athletic training. How can I help maybe them when they're returning someone? Like having normative data of like, hey, what a normal practice is for that player. Maybe we can reverse engineer and help them provide certain targets that we feel is going to help them get to there in a nice progressive way. Performance nutrition. Hey, we do a lot with their information that we collect from them, but I don't need them to be in Excel or Power BI or try to learn R. Like, hey, give that to us. That way we can streamline that process for you and get you the information that you need to then do your job. Like again, I'm definitely not a dietitian. I'm not giving any advice from that aspect, but the information they're collecting is super valuable for them and they can use that to enhance, hey, what does this person need based off DEXA, hydration, blood work. It's just, again, there's so much data out there that being able to manage all that and then more importantly, tie it all together and integrate it
Mhm.
into one system to allow us to, again, have the best picture of what our athletes are at or how they're feeling or what's going on with them to then at the end of the day allow us to do our job better. Like how do we use that to not only like change what's going on, but maybe it's just confirm like, hey, we're on the right track, or hey, 90% of the team is on the right track. This 10% something's going on. Let's dive a little deeper. And the more information we have, the more quality information we have, I think the more impact we can have with our athletes.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that theme of like connecting the dots and being the communication facilitator there. Probably it's not necessarily making different decisions, as you said, but just making sure in the first instance everyone has the information and can make good decisions based on information, not just tapping in the dark. Oh, what does medical think about that? You also mentioned obviously like a common notion in sports science, like you're the tech guy or the player load or load management guy, which always evolves around like availability, readiness, obviously a very conditioning focused aspect, or maybe return to play focus. What about, I think you mentioned assessment too, like assessment, talent identification. Are you involved with the sports science program there as well, as you, especially now with the NIL era, and obviously it even being more important to get the right guys and girls? Are you involved with that as well? Like, how are you assessing that early on in the process when you're now probably also in that phase of try to prepare the team for the next season?
Yeah, it's kind of hard because we aren't professional sports that we're allowed to maybe evaluate players before they come in. But
Mm-hmm.
obviously, if we have coaches here at Texas A&M that are recruiting you, like you're probably a good athlete. So that's not what we're worried about. It's maybe the development piece, which I know Coach Morrison is huge on. Like we're here to develop humans and then obviously develop them as athletes as well. That is kind of not going away, but there's less of that. Obviously, with transfer portal, everyone going in and out, to where it's really maybe changed our thought process of, hey, you have 3 to 4 years to work with this one athlete. Now you might be like, hey, you have one season with them. Like, how do we get the most out of this person? And I think that's starting with like what kind of person that is, and that's where, hey, providing some assessments to maybe get a better profile of them of like, hey, we know they're strong in this area, they're weak in this area. What kind of things can we do to either do we need to keep their strong or their strengths high, or do we need to improve their weaknesses for them to be an overall better player for our system and our staff? Again, a lot of people are coming in, they might have previous injuries, and that affects, hey, how much can you practice? How hard can you go? And at least for us, having some normative data on like what our type of practices are, using KINEXON and knowing, hey, how long we go, how much load that is, how many jumps does this position get from that position, all that. At least we have a good idea of, hey, this is where we're going to get to. Now, how do we just work back and be like, how do we get them there in the safest, most uniform way that allows them to progress and develop in whatever time span we have? Again, sometimes that's literally one semester because they come in right before the season and then they're done. Or, hey, luckily, like this last season, I think we had 9 seniors and most of them had been here for a long time. We've seen them develop over the years. Like, and I think that's a huge reason why we were successful. We had a lot of really, really good athletes. We have a great coaching staff, but we had people bought into what we do and how we do it. And we were able to develop them to get to where we got to.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, we already talked a little bit about the collaboration, and you mentioned a couple of different stakeholders there already. But I want to dive a little bit more into that, especially also with, I would imagine, the coaching staff in particular. Can you outline a little bit who the relevant stakeholders for you are, who you are collaborating most with? Who are you sharing the data with, the reports with? Is that the head coach, assistant coach? Yeah, can you walk us through a little bit? Who are your main go-to persons with the information that you're collecting and also getting from other departments?
Yeah. So the cool thing about, again, the volleyball staff is like we're very, very integrated on so many different levels that one, I share an office, not this one. I share an office in the weight room with our strength coach, and that's, you want to talk about just tangents all day. Me and Tom will have one conversation that turns into 2 hours of just going down a different rabbit hole. So one, that's amazing, just having that right there. That way we can pick each other's brains. But we are lucky enough that our staff week meets at least once a week for sure, but has a lot of informal dialogue between the week. And so we have our coaching staff in there, our director of analytics who does a lot of the scouting, all that. our director of ops, which is really important when it comes to all the logistics and travel and all that. Then we have our performance and wellness units. So that includes strength and conditioning, athletic training, performance nutrition, counseling, sports psych, sports science. Our academic advisor is in there, and we utilize him so much because of just the demands that academic load has on these athletes, especially in season, trying to win a championship when someone has a final that day. Like those things happen, and they happen to us. So how do we proactively get ahead of that? And that's where those meetings are so helpful. Like I think one of our strengths is like we are so proactive with a lot of things we do of like, hey, we're not sitting there being like, what's the plan for the upcoming week? Like that's been decided. It's just more like confirming based off where we were last week or maybe where the athletes are today using their questionnaire or using yesterday's RPE or all the data we are collecting. How can that help us inform like what's the plan going forward? So having those meetings are so helpful. And again, because of just how they're structured, we normally, because our rosters are somewhat smaller than most sports, we are able to go player by player. And we're able to talk
Hmm.
about, hey, this player from an athletic training standpoint, Ted is our athletic trainer. She'll talk about, hey, this is what's going on, good, bad, whatever. Then normally strength conditioning, Tom will talk about them and be like, hey, this is what I'm seeing. Then it goes to academics. And I've been able to work with Chris a lot of like, hey, we've been able to quantify when people have assignments, what type of assignments they are. Are they like a harder one, like an exam or a paper? Are they like a discussion post that might be a little easier? So we're even trying to quantify that. And that way, all that information is talked about in that meeting, but we also have it on our TVs. Like we just have a dashboard that all that information is coming in of, hey, last week's
Okay.
load is right there. It'll ping us when someone's academic load is way higher than normal. It'll ping us when their hydration was above average for the last time. All these different things, the assessments we do drop jump weekly with the team. If that's a flag of maybe just lower than normal, doesn't mean we need to change anything. I think it's just something to be aware of. But having all that information in one place and then having all the stakeholders in one place to talk through each of our athletes allows us to get really nitty gritty, and which is really good when you're trying to find that 1 to 2% that hopefully leads to what we were able to achieve, which is national championship. So lots of good stuff happens there from an individual standpoint. And then we also talk about just the training or the schedule of the week of like, hey, because we know our schedule ahead of time, we can be like, hey, let's plan out when are we going to do an off day? Just because in NCAA sports, you have to have one required off day. But
Hmm.
hey, we know we need to travel before we go to this competition. How does that affect practice? We haven't been able to really load because we had to travel 2 weeks before. We had a crazy tournament. Maybe we need to add more to this practice. So during those meetings, that's where we kind of talk about the training load, the physical kind of aspect of what we're going to do that week. And that's where, again, everyone's involved, but I would say our GM, assistant coach, Jeff, is really, really dialed in because we're able to at least provide some recommendations on maybe the loads of each practice. And then he gets to go be a great coach and be like, all right, what entails that load? Hey, if we're going to practice this long, if we have this kind of targeted AEL that we want to hit, how do we
Hmm.
achieve that? And that's where him being just a great coach, we're able to get really, really close to what we intend the sessions to be.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, so they have an open ear to that conversation. That's great. I think that's oh yeah, I would say almost half the buy-in that you need to have. If the coaches are on your side and understand the purpose and the value that the information can deliver and are also willing, I think in the first step, obviously to listen to it, but then also ultimately maybe to make one or two changes, even if they don't tell you that they considered the data. I think it's always good. Um, in If we look at last season, maybe even, but also going into the new one, did those meetings and kind of like how you structure them and the things that you talked about, did that change over the course of the season through the SEC tournament, the NCAA tournament, when you prepared for those important games? And then maybe even an extension to that question, are there any learnings from last year and how it went there to what you want to apply this year if you go through those meetings again?
Yeah, I think it's been interesting that, at least for me personally, having worked with volleyball and again with two different staffs and having two different ways, trying to stack something every single year on top of each other to
Mm-hmm.
get to somewhere that, again, in 2018 was not going to be possible. So the cool thing about some of the stuff, like the intended loads that we talk about, slash we can talk about more of, I actually started that in 18 with our previous staff. I remember bringing it to them of like, hey, I want to do session RP training load with them. And I was just like, hey, the girls would just, after the session, they would provide 1 to 10. How hard was it? And actually, Wendell was one of the coaches at the time. He came up to me and he was like, well, what if I gave you what I think they're going to say? And I was like, that's amazing. Yeah, let's do that. And so that way, that's where we started the intended versus experience, kind of, at least from an RPE standpoint, that they would provide me what they think the athletes were going to say. And then we would obviously get what the athletes did say, and we can kind of compare to see, hey, how far off were we? Were they expecting a practice to be really, really hard, but the athletes didn't think it, or vice versa? Were they thinking, oh, that practice is going to be super easy, but all the athletes rated a 5, a 6, a 7? That's like really important, at least to me. If that misalignment's there, it's going to be hard for us to even look at relative training loads over time and be like, hey, is this working or not? And so we started that with the volleyball program in 18. And then in 2020 or 21, I just started asking, hey, how long do you think the practice is going to be? Because I think duration is a great limiter, or it's a great determinant on a lot of other things. Like if you don't want to have a high volume AEL practice, the easiest solution is to go shorter.
Yeah.
Yes, maybe a coach tries to make it super dense and tries to get a lot of stuff done, but you're only going to be able to get so much done in so amount of time. So
Yeah.
I always felt like duration is a great determinant of all the other training variables that we're looking at when it comes to volume, intensity, density. So I thought being able to maybe get what we intended it to be and matching that with what it actually turned out to be. Because everyone says, hey, we're just going to go an hour and a half today. And then it turns into 2 hours, 2.5 hours of that. Because
Yeah.
coaches want to go, which is not a problem. I think it's more understanding what that results the next day or the next week. Because if you say, hey, today is going to be nice, short, sweet, easy, that way we can go harder tomorrow, but then you go longer and harder, going back to back hard days might not be ideal. Versus, hey, if we do maybe have a longer that day, then you have to come back down and then you get to go longer. But I think having objective and mission saying, yes, we are going longer than what we expect, or hey, we're doing more than what we expect, is the first step. Like you said, it is like one of the first things that we need to get right of. What is the plan? Like having a coach's, what is the legit plan? And they have a practice plan. They know what drills they're going to do. But from a physical standpoint, I think having those common kind of variables, volume, intensity, density, all that is really important. So again, previous staff, we did RP, we did duration, and then you can calculate session RP training load. I think the cool thing we did with Jamie when he came in was that first year, we kept doing that because, again, he is a very unique, awesome coach that during our first meeting, he brought up to me, hey, do we do RPE train or monitoring? I was like, yes. The fact that a coach is asking me that, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And then the
Exactly.
second thing he kind of said is like, hey, I want you to kind of program our practices. I was like, well, what do you mean by that? And he's like, well, I want you to tell us when we need to go, when we need to pull back, based off all the stuff you're doing. I was like, okay, I've never had a coach tell me that either. So during our first meeting, I knew it was going to be a unique experience. But so from that first year, we kept doing the intended RP, intended duration, intended session RP training load. But on the back end, I started to play around with AAL. Just from like a team average standpoint, I was like, let me see if I can try to see how close we would be using the additional information I had, the practice plan, all that. And it turned out like we were pretty close to what I was expecting. And so the following year, that became part of our process of like, hey, it would be on our kind of living spreadsheet that everyone had access to. They could go in and see, hey, on this day for this session, what do we think? How long is it going to be? What do we think we're going to do from an AAL standpoint? And then when you do that, you can also get density because AAL divided by duration, that's density. So that second year, that's where we really grew into density conversations. And not even like getting into, oh, this practice needs to be a 4.6 or a 5.2. It was more like Jeff was like, hey, I see this practice needs to be an hour or hour 45 minutes. Does it need to be a high density, low density? And I would just be like, well, coming off an off day, maybe we have a little lower density, build them back in. That way, the following day, when we go 2 hours, we know the load's going to be higher, but maybe we keep the same density or go higher. And he was like, got it. That's all I need. I was like, that's awesome. And so that led to even this year adding another block to, I would try to estimate high intensity AL. So just taking out on KINEXON system that lower band using the top 3 band, I would then guesstimate what the team average high intensity AL would be. That way I could have conversations with Jeff. I'm like, hey, this is this type of load practice, this is this type of density, and it's this percentage of intensity. Because we would just take that high intensity AL divided by the total AL to get a percentage of how much of that work was intense. That way we could start to manipulate very simple, like 4 to 5 different metrics. If you manipulate those, you can kind of get the training that you want. Hey, do you want this to be a higher volume practice, but maybe lower density versus lower intensity? Or hey, maybe we do want a super short, super low volume, but it needs to be high intensity, high density, all that. And so it just grew and grew and grew. And then obviously having conversations with Jeff, with Tom, with everyone on staff of just like, how do we want practice to go? I think just helped us through that to kind of reassure that, hey, what we're doing is what we plan to do. Not saying it worked. Like, I think that comes with some other things and like availability, performance, all that. But at least we're starting with the basics of, are we doing what we're saying we're doing?
Yeah. Yeah, I like that a lot, especially how you framed it with the volume, intensity, density. I always like to call that the metric trifecta also, just to start thinking about that as your baseline, and then don't not getting too much hung up on what specific KINEXON metrics to use. But if we understand that concept with session duration or volume, intensity, density, then we can pick out of each of those buckets the metrics that fit in there, whether that's AL per minute, or like the high intensity stuff in relation to the total volume. Breaking it down that way, I think, is really a helpful tool. I think for everyone who listens in, because I think that's a common question, like what metrics should we look at? What should we manage there? How should they be in relation to each other? And then I think the other point that you made, translating it back to session duration, just knowing that a lot of the volume metrics, especially that people like to think in, are correlated with time. So the more time you're out there, the more load you're going to have, kind of thing. I think is an interesting way, and it helps it break down or breaks the conversation down for coaches into how they think, right? I mean, I have more of a basketball background. They always like to think in minutes. In volleyball, it might be in sets, but if we can translate that, okay, this is like 50% of like a typical set that we play in a high level game, then I feel like it resonates more with people than the traditional load metrics that we're offering.
I like from the metric, like picking metrics, and again, having been full time at least here for 9 years, I remember when I was again still coming up, still learning, and I'm still learning right now. But I would try to look at everything under the sun, and the more you do this, I think everyone says it's like simplify. And the fact that I would say at most the coaches maybe see 6 metrics.
Hmm.
Probably, I would say 7 when you include RP, but our 6 metrics are AL, high intensity AL, and that percentage. So they're
Hmm.
all kind of the same thing there, but then the other ones are just because of volleyball and jumps and how that relates to just performance. That the other ones are total jumps, high intensity jumps, and the percentage of those. And so even though, yeah, those are 6 metrics, it's kind of the same 3 metrics in just different lenses of, hey, that total workload kind of uniform across the whole team. Obviously, there are positional differences and all that, but because we do it, we use that so much with the intended and experience analysis that we do. Like everyone kind of understands that of like, hey, AL, total kind of work, all that. But then when with our sport and just the jumping involved, we also need to look at the jumps required for each position, just because those are drastically different. There's more variability in jumps than there is AL across the positions, just because the role is like, hey, setters, they're going to jump a lot, but they're not going to be probably as intense as what our outsides or opposites or middles are
Right.
doing. And then our not poor DSs, our DSs, they're not supposed to jump. Like that's not their role really. So maybe that's not the metric we look at them. We look at AL for them mostly. But if we need to go look at exertions or anything like that, the data is there. But for us, at least the principle that we try to talk about in our unit is like do less better. Like, how do you use less metrics? How can you simplify a lot of things, but do more with it? Like, we've talked about AL, high intensity AL duration so much that there's so many different ways to utilize that if you just have different lenses of like, hey, you talked about what percent of match it is. So, um,
Hmm.
obviously basketball, like there's certain minutes played and all that, but volleyball, you can have a 3 set match, a 4 set match, 5 set match. So when
Yep.
someone's always like, hey, what percent of a competition is that? And it's like, well, which one? But the
Yeah,
cool
exactly.
thing is having normative data with it or having years of data with it. I have a really, really good idea of what a 3 set match is for
Yeah.
that kind of position, who's a 3 rotation versus a 6 rotation versus a setter versus an outside versus a middle, and having those norms, like it's what we do is I feel like very simple. It's just reverse engineer of like, hey, we know we're gonna get there for a 3 set. We know we're gonna probably play a 4 set. We're not ever gonna probably train for the worst case scenario, which is like a 5 set, but we definitely in the preseason we have practices that exceed that. And we want
Right.
that. Like if they are very purposely trained or planned out of like, hey, we build up, we come down, we get them ready by week 2, week 3. Like, yeah, we are gonna prepare them for almost the worst case scenario. Maybe not from a total AEL standpoint, but high intensity AEL, I would hope we either match or exceed what a normal match is because we want to get their bodies prepared for that before they get exposed to it before. And that's where again it's crazy different sports how that works because again soccer, having worked with soccer for a while, we're
Yeah.
probably never going to get to the total. We should never get to the total distance of what a game is for them. If we do, we're just running to run. Versus high intensity distance, for sure. We should not only match that in the summer, we should exceed that by a lot. Sprinting distance. We
Yeah.
actually don't sprint too much during a game, but we are definitely during the summer training with them before they get going. They will be sprinting way more than what they get in a game. So I think it's just having that context, knowing what's important for each position, what's important from a planning standpoint. That way, again, just preparing them for what they're going to get, and then also managing that stimulus and recovery throughout the whole year.
Yeah. No, I like that a lot. Also thinking of a marathon there. You typically don't run the marathon
No.
in training.
Yep.
But you do a lot of threshold work, which is obviously also a little bit faster than what you're doing then in the race, but it's still going to help you. What I want to point out what you said, because I think it's between the lines, but just to summarize that again, what I really liked about what you were saying is, um, simplifying, yes, and trying to break it down, but at the same time, I think you made that nuance, and we need to contextualize still what the data tells us, right? So we can't rely on one metric, and I think volleyball is a great sport for that to think about, because a lot of people that we also talk to, and if they're either using our system or other technologies, they obviously think a lot about jumps, because jumps is like one of the primary factors, but it's probably not the only one. And we already touched a little bit on the different playing positions, so I want to ask you a follow-up question there as well. But uh, what you said, essentially contextualizing the data with different external load metrics um, that can help us describe those different positional demands or game demands. And then at the same time, also still with the RPE and the intended length and what the coaches tell us, getting also not only the external objective perspective, but internal objective as well as subjective experience from the players, but also from the coaches. And really, if we think of it, internal, external, subjective, objective on that quadrant, essentially, really getting all the dimensions into the equation while still keeping it as simple as possible, but at the same time also not just reducing it to one number, because that might be misleading. So I really liked how you outlined that and wanted to bring that into a little picture for the people out there too.
Oh,
But yes, yeah, go
I
ahead.
would love to go deeper in that because context is key with any data. Like I normally, and I tell our staff all the time, of you have to be ready for the follow up of you tell a coach, hey, someone jumps 150 times during practice. Most coaches, well, if they care, they're going to be like, well, what is that good? Is that bad? Is that high? Is that
Right.
low? And so I think it always starts with obviously match norms or practice norms and all that. But like you said, I think there's so many different lenses we can do with it. And especially in the sport of volleyball, where there are so many different types of things going on. Like we said, there are 3 different types of matches we can have. That's
Yeah.
one thing. Two, there are so many different types of positions. And even within that position, there's different rotation types. Like we have an
Mm.
outside who plays 6 rotations versus an outside who plays 3 rotations. Those are different from a volume, intensity, density, all that. A setter, again, we just have one setter who normally goes 6 rotations. Our middles are kind of 3 rotations, but those 2 middles that we had are very, very different middles from a physical, mental standpoint that like we can't treat everyone the same. Um, that's where most of our analysis is on a very individual basis of, hey, is that practice or is that the whatever demands we have relative to their data for that season, is it high? Is it low? It's never is it good or is it bad? At least from a training load standpoint, for me, it's never high is good, low is bad. It is what
Mhm.
it is. But being able to contextualize like, hey, that 4 set match we just had is this person's highest 4 set match of the year because of the way we are able to analyze it. I only compare 4 set matches to 4 set matches. If I need to compare 3 to 3, I can, 5 to 5, all that. But and then being able to do that with practices, I think is even better. And because of how we do our intended duration, like we normally just do it with 15-minute increments. So normally we'll have a 75-minute, a 90, a 105, a 120, a 135, so on, to
Mhm.
where now we have a practice and someone asks me, is that high or is that low? Well, yeah, a 120 practice, it's going to be on the higher end of all of our practices. But if I compared that 120 practice to other 120 practices, it could have been low. And I
Right.
think that adds even more context of like, oh, well, why? What was different? Was the drills that we did in that 120 different than the other one? Was that kind of the purpose with our intended density that maybe we wanted it to be on the lower end? So I think, again, I have a lot of different normative tables that allow me to very quickly be like, hey, if I group all our practices together, this is what average is, this is what I would deem as low, this is what I deem as high. Cool. Now, if I take all those practices and I break it out into those that are supposed to be 90 minutes, what is average, what's high, what's low? what's a 105, what's a 120 practice, what's a 135. Same thing with matches. Like if I just grouped all our matches together, you're averaging a lot of very
Hmm.
different matches that I don't think it's as impactful to where if you have enough data, what is a 3 set match? What is an average for that individual? What is an average for that type of position? And just the way we kind of maybe code some things in our database of like, hey, when I average these data, I'm only including people who played significant minutes. And when I average practices together, I'm only including players that one practiced the whole time, but two had no limitations. That way, none of that data gets in there, and you kind of just reduce your you reduce your confidence interval to be very very small, but you're very targeted on what you want. I think that's
Yeah.
what we want. Like you can have so many different routes to get to the end goal of whatever your end goal is, but I think that's the kind of point of all this monitoring that we're doing is like, how do we just close that window? That way we feel very, very, very confident this is the right path that we need to take. Versus, again, if you don't have any insight, you could do so many different things and you might be like, well, that worked, but you don't know why it worked. So I think that's the kind of whole
Yeah.
point of sports science is to quantify what you're doing and then quantify like, is it working? Is it like helping you achieve your goal, whatever your goal is?
Yeah. Yeah, no, well explained. I think that's that's why we all love the sports science piece. Trying to be to maintain, no, the other way around, trying to be as simplistic as possible, but without losing the simplicity or without losing the specificity of the sport. So kind of like walking that continuum between, yeah, trying to simplify the complex, but also don't lose too much information so we can't explain it anymore. Now, I really like that. Maybe one specifically to the playing positions again that you mentioned. Um, for coaches out there also that maybe just get started with this and obviously they understand the point of like, oh, there are all these different dimensions and I can really target my analysis in different directions. What are two questions there? What are some things that you would recommend for somebody starting out to do first, right? We obviously just said that there are so many different ways where we can diversify our analysis and go into different directions. What's maybe like an easy or two easy steps that practitioners can take at the beginning when they just start out? And if so, I'm putting the word in your mouth there with the playing positions. If that's something, where do you see, or what metrics do you see with different playing positions maybe being relevant? If we think about, hey, we have 5, 6 different metrics that we're looking at, do you see, or yeah, what are the differences between different playing positions in volleyball?
Yeah. So starting out, what would I do? I think getting the plan and whatever means makes the most sense to the coach. That way, not saying we always cater to coaches, but if it comes from the coach and it's his or her idea, like that's going to probably go longer than if it's you coming in saying, "Hey, I want to do this with this." And what can we get from the practice or session standpoint from the training variables that we talked about? Volume. And if that is as simple as like literally asking how long the practice is going to be, that's probably a good
Hmm.
enough volume metric that you could just get away with that. But if you do need to go deeper and maybe be like, hey, how much do you think they're going to run or how much do you think they're going to jump? If there is something objective that they can kind of get a better sense of it, cool, use that as well. But I think duration by itself is number one because then you could probably start to assume some things of like, oh, if they say they're only going to go super short, I bet they're going to try to get a lot done in that time because if coaches are in practice, they want to get stuff done. So um, I think having the plan from a volume standpoint and then somehow getting a either density and intensity kind of category from the coach. And it doesn't have to be like a true objective number like you get from a KINEXON, like an AL or AL per minute or high intensity AL percentage. I think a lot of other sports, what we just try to get an idea and we'll just bucket it like, hey, coach, on a 1 to 5 scale, 5 being the most intense practice you're ever going to have versus 1's going to be the lowest intense practice, where would you stack that? And I think that's the best place to start, even if you do have a wearable of like, hey, I want to see where they're at on a pretty simplified scale. And then I can use the information we get from a KINEXON to be like, well, when they say it's a 5, that density came out to be this number. When they say it's a 1, it came out to be this number. So now you're starting to anchor what their language is to maybe some objective data that you're getting, that you can then at the end of that semester, when you worked on this, be like, hey, coach, when you said it was going to be super dense, this is what the number it actually came out to be. Maybe
Hmm.
going forward, I might use that as our high density day versus when you said this is an intense practice, this is that percentage of how much work was done above a certain threshold. Going forward, maybe we use that from our planning, or you just keep doing the buckets and you just do all the work on the back end because, again, some coaches love numbers and they understand it and they're all into it, and some are just like, tell me what I need to do or tell me the important stuff, and that 1 to 5
Yeah.
scale works great. Um, so I think that's always step one, is to just know the plan and then build on it. Like we talked about stack blocks every single year or every week, whatever, like, hey, I know the volume. I know how long we're in practice. Now the next question is, all right, maybe how intense is that practice? And even if it is just relative of like, if you compare the first practice versus second practice this week, which one's higher volume, which one's higher intensity? Great. Now I know what he's kind of thinking or she's thinking from that standpoint, and I can start to put this puzzle together using objective information if you have a wearable, if you have a tracking system, all that. When it comes to position differences, I think that's the unique thing, at least in our thing. Like, yes, we have, I think it always comes back to normative data. Like, again, knowing
Hmm.
what each position does is the start. And it's very descriptive, but it's very, very impactful. At the same time, if I came to our coach with like one of my dissertation chapters, which is basically what are the demands of a match,
Hmm.
and I told him that yes, setters are significantly higher jumps, total jumps than outside. If I told our coaches that, they'd be like, have you not watched the sport of volleyball? Like, yeah, we already know that. Get out of here.
Yeah,
And so
exactly.
the coaches kind of already know a lot of that stuff. Maybe it helps us be very precise when we are training some things, but from a training and practice standpoint, coaches are like, our coaches here are really good. Like, they're gonna
Yeah.
work with each position and get what they need. And yes, I think we all, whoever's listening to this podcast is probably very interested on the physical side of things, the training load, the jumps and all that. Like, they also have to go play the sport of volleyball, which is very technical, tactical, that they have to practice that stuff. And that's where the integration between the physical, mental, technical, tactical, like that's the blend, that's the sweet spot of like, if you can get everything done and it all kind of works together, that way they're not just accumulating jumps to accumulate jumps. Like, I can accumulate what they get in a match in 30 minutes if I want to, but that's not going to make them better volleyball players.
Right.
Being able to work in that system, work with a team, and be able to be strategic on how we maybe get to the final product of the physical load that we need to get to, that's the goal. Like, again, the volleyball has to be the forefront. Like, that's why they're here. That's why they play their sport. From the physical aspect, cool, we'll get there. Like, especially with how at least our staff thinks about the physical loading aspect, we'll get them ready for that. But they have to be good volleyball players too. So that's where the practice, the skill acquisition, all that comes into play. It's just marrying that with the physical. That's the fun part of my job. And again, when you work with really, really great people, it's really easy to do.
Yeah. No, I love that. Especially, yeah, the piece that you said, we need to be descriptive before we can be prescriptive, but keeping in mind that we yeah, trust still the intuition, obviously, that's also already out there with the coaches and the experience that they have. And then, yeah, translating that back not only into the performance insights, but obviously all these other dimensions, as you said, the not only the physiological but the psychological pieces as well, that they all align. I know we're already getting to the end here. I could do this forever with your. Maybe one last question that I had, especially with your long run here into the tournament and obviously the championship. Uh, I would say that's probably the best case, and at the same time the worst case scenario to prepare for, if we think about the demands of a short period of time with a lot of game exposure, right? So you had only a couple days there essentially with multiple rounds, multiple matches. I don't know, I read somewhere 6 matches in about 2 weeks, 16 days, something like that. um, how how did the data help you during that period and everything that we basically just described, and how you prepared? Yeah, how did that change in that final part of the season? Um, did you or do you think the data definitely made an impact there to be better prepared in those moments, maybe also compared to the competition? Or how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think again, our staff is so proactive that whenever we got our like schedule, even in the spring before the fall season, like we had an idea of what the demands were going to be later on. And I think the cool part is like we talk about it in our staff, and it's not like a joke or like, hey, this could be nice. Like we talked about, we want to be peaking in December. Like obviously, we want to be peaking at the Final Four.
Yeah.
And I think that's where us being proactive and having that vision and that mindset of like, this is how we're going to get there helped us when we did get there. Like, it wasn't anything that anyone was shocked by. Like, yes, going to Nebraska and going 5 sets versus Louisville and then beating Nebraska at their place in 5 sets. Yeah, that might have shocked a lot of other people, but I really did feel like we were ready for that because of all the training we did. And again, we had really, really great players. We had really, really good coaching staff. Like all these kind of factors came into us again being able to do that. But I think it was something we looked at it for sure at the beginning of the season, like, hey, this is our normal flow throughout the year because volleyball is not like a football that, hey, you know you're going to play on Saturday and you kind of know what your Monday practice, Tuesday practice, Wednesday practice are because that rhythm is so consistent. Volleyball, like we would somehow at the beginning, you have tournaments. We were lucky enough to go play in a special kind of tournament at the beginning versus then we come back, we play two back to back. We had a lot of travel in the non-conference kind of season before we got into
Hmm.
season play. And even SEC tournament or SEC competitions are not like standard. Sometimes we would play Wednesday, Friday, and then I think the next week we would play a Wednesday, Sunday, and then we would play a Friday, and then but we never had a normal rhythm week. But again, I think that's one of the strengths of the staff is I think we're good at being agile because we're so proactive. And so
Yes.
we kind of had a plan of, hey, knowing that we're going to play this Friday, Sunday, Monday's going to be off, our next game's going to be Friday. We had the ability to plan our practices well ahead. We could even reactively adjust if needed of like, hey, maybe we did have a rough weekend. Maybe they do need an extra day off. Maybe Chris with academics is seeing like, hey, the whole team, we've just been on the road for 2 weeks straight. Finals or they have exams coming up, midterms. This could be a time to allow them to get some more time to focus on academics. That way, they're not stressed about that. They come to practice, something bad happens. Like using all of our resources, all of our monitoring tools of like, hey, we use questionnaires, we use our jumps, we use all this information to kind of see where they're going and how they're responding to training. Allowed us to get through the SEC competition, and then SEC tournament was new this year, and that's where we were lucky enough. We were a top 4 seed, meaning we got to bypass the first 2 rounds. So at most, we would play 3 games. Versus if you were a part of that first couple of rounds, you could have played a max of 5 games in a row, which is insane.
Hmm. Yeah.
But at least we knew going in, hey, the max we're going to play is 3. We have not played back-to-back matches in at least a few months. So, and again, Jamie's great. Like 3 weeks even before the SEC tournament, he was like, "Hey, looking ahead, is there anything we need to do different to allow us to be prepared for the SEC tournament of, hey, we could potentially play 5. Luckily, we only played 3, but how do we get their bodies ready to play 3 matches back to back to back? And so we did do some strategic things where maybe when we normally had a Friday, Sunday match, Saturday, we would normally have like a lighter day just to get them going and just to get some recovery before playing Sunday's match. I remember, I think we had one practice on Saturday where we told them up front, we're like, hey, we're going to push it a little more today just to get us ready for when we have to maybe do this with the SEC. And being able to educate our athletes on that and be like, we're not just going hard to go hard. Like, we understand y'all just played a match yesterday. We understand we have to play a match the next day. This is to help prepare us for what's coming up, which again then prepares us for that next step, which is the NCAAs and all that. So, like, again, if you are just proactive and you kind of see where you need to be and you just work backwards, you can kind of plan for that. Then we go to the SEC. We only played 2 games because Texas did beat us in the semifinals. So the cool thing about that one was we had like 4 different plans when it came to the SEC tournament, because you just don't know of like, hey, if we play the first day and lose, what do we do from a practice schedule? Because that's also the same week of Thanksgiving. So then there's those dynamics of travel, seeing family, all that. Of, hey, if we lose the first day and we travel back, what do we do practice before Thanksgiving? What do we do after? Because there was 10 days between the SEC tournament and the first round of the NCAA. Like, that's a long time. And time we needed to recover, but also a time to maybe rebuild our base going into the tournament. But because you didn't know the SEC tournament, like what's going to happen, are you going to play 3 days straight and make it to the final? Are you going to play the first day, get knocked out? We played the second day, so we played back-to-back days. We come home, we have 1, maybe 2 practices before Thanksgiving. But all that was pre-planned. Like, we had all talked about it. He was like, hey, if this situation happens, we're going to probably do this. If this happens, we're going to do this, and so on. Then we kind of had to wait and see with the selection show. And because we kind of knew what happened with the SEC tournament, we knew that we probably weren't going to be a top 4 seed. So we would host the first round, but have to go somewhere. We just didn't know where, and we didn't know it was going to be Nebraska. So, but we had an idea of, hey, first round, you're going to play back-to-back. Let's make sure we're prepared. And we did that with that 10-day buildup of, we had 2 practices that were pretty intense and volume-wise pretty heavy back-to-back before we had to get into that next week where we had the first round of NCAAs. Luckily, the second round, you have a day in between. So that's our kind of normal cadence. And then Final Four, you had 2 days in between because we would play Thursday, Sunday. So that part we had kind of planned out and we knew it. I think it's just the outside factors that go into a lot of travel. Like SEC tournament, they were gone, I think, 4 straight days of you get there 2 days early, you play 2 days, then you come home. Then the girls are traveling for Thanksgiving. We were lucky enough we got to host the first round, so we get to be on our beds, be comfortable there as finals are going on. That second round, or when we go to Nebraska, hey, we're there for 4 straight days. And then we win Sunday, we get home, we have Monday off, and then I believe Tuesday we're headed to Kansas City because you have to do all the obligations there, like media and all that. But again, we were prepared. Like, we knew in Kansas City, we're probably not going to have a loaded practice, but our goal was to have a very efficient, dense practice. That way, again, there's so many things going on there. Like, hey, they have to do media. We have to go to this event. We got to do this thing. To be able to lock in, we were just like, hey, let's be short, sweet, purposeful, intentful with what we need to do, and then get out. Obviously, that helps when, from a recovery standpoint, not loading them really, really heavy before they go play. And luckily, we were able to get out in 3 versus Pitt, and then we were able to win in 3 versus Kentucky. So yeah, I don't even know what the original question was, but I think it all comes back to like having a strategy and having a proactive plan at the end of the day. And again, just working together when it comes to making these decisions, using the good information that you have. And again, if you have a good system in place that gives you the big rocks, which for us is like, again, training loads from the physical side, recovery that we can get from their RP and their questionnaire and all that. Like it helps us kind of inform decisions. And again, this last season was a lot of confirming like, hey, we're kind of on the right track. Yeah, there were some instances where we were like, hey, maybe this athlete, something's going on and we can adjust. But most of it was like, hey, we are going in the right direction. Let's keep going.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you talked about having a strategy and a plan in place. So back to the question, obviously, how you managed to prepare for that very dense period of the tournament and the Final Four and obviously the championship game. I think the takeaway for everyone is like there's a lot of preparation that goes into it, and if you manage to prepare and understand all the different things, all the different dimensions we talked about across the season and the weeks and months before that, then you can set up for different plans and be prepared and kind of like lean back a little bit. Okay, let's see what happens. We have everything in our back pocket. I started in our conversation before we started recording the podcast and said or used the word sophisticated. So I want to come back to that to close it out a little bit. I think everyone that is going to listen into this episode will understand that what you're doing is pretty sophisticated in the most positive sense that I can choose. So everything that you're preparing and all the different dimensions and aspects, internal, external data, objective, subjective information, bringing all the different stakeholders together. There's a lot that can be done. And I think from teams that I've talked to, I think Texas A&M sounds like, and rightfully so, as the champions are on the forefront there, and obviously using a lot of the available information already to your advantage in volleyball. I don't think we've seen that with too many teams, neither here in the US, but also not in Europe. So I think there's a lot of good things to take away for teams, but I want to give you the last word here with the last question and just ask you again, for those that maybe just start out, what are maybe 3 things that practitioners can take away from this call, or from that you would recommend when they're trying to build this system that you were talking about, and try to take the first steps on the road to where you are?
Yeah. Again, one is have really good people around you. Like, I'm very, very blessed with the people obviously on the volleyball staff, the coaching staff, the athletic trainer, the strength coach. Like, we're all invested, and we give a lot. But obviously, student athletes is at the center of it. Like, we want to help make an impact on them. So that's step one, is like, again, have really, really good people. I'm blessed, like, the managers with our volleyball team do so much for me when it comes to logistics of KINEXON. Just because, again, in my role, I can't be at practice every day. But the fact that me and Jeff were actually talking about this, I don't think we missed any data the whole year. Like, I don't think we had any issues. We might have had one nugget go home with an athlete and they brought it back and we were able to get that data. But like, that's rare, because I've worked in this a while. Like, things happen. Technology doesn't work sometimes. Like, things get forgotten. The fact that we didn't have that is a kudos to that staff and how we have it and the logistics we have. So that's super helpful. It helps when you have the roster we had. Like, we had really, really good athletes. Like, yes, I hope all the stuff we're talking about today of like the monitoring and all that helped part of why we got to where we did, but we also had really, really good athletes. But to be able to achieve, I think, any championship, or like to be the best at what you're doing, it takes a lot. I think you need to get the talent, you need to make sure they're available. Like, those 2 things are really, really important, because if you don't have the talent, but they're always available, you're probably not going to win a championship. But if you have the talent and they're not available, you're definitely not going to win. And I think the third kind of component that goes with those 2 is, I don't know if the term readiness is the right one, but like, are they ready to perform when they need to perform? just because, again, you have the talent and they're available, if you don't properly train them to be ready for when they need to be ready, you might not win. And so, and that's where like a lot of people say, oh, we can predict winning and losing. Like there's so many factors that go into winning and losing that my goal is not to predict that. It's how do we increase our likelihood of success, which obviously is winning or losing. So, hey, if get the right people, make sure they're available, make sure they're ready to go when we need them to go. Cool. I think we did our job, which is increase our likelihood of success. And again, when you add that of like the coaching staff we had and the investment that they're giving to our student athletes, like that would be step one of like if you want to build some type of system, I think that's one. But when it comes to like the practical kind of side of things, again, getting normative good information on each of your athletes, each of your positions to have a better framework to help inform when you do need to make decisions on, hey, how long is the practice? What do we need to do in those practices? All of that. I think that's step two. And then as you say, step three is again, having the plan and quantifying that plan ahead of time, proactively. Everyone has a schedule. Like everyone knows their schedule. There's no reason why you should be surprised that someone is or the team's feeling really, really fatigued today, or hey, they're saying there's soreness or all that. Like you should have a kind of a good idea of when that stuff's going to happen based off if you have a plan. And it's funny, like me and Tom, the strength coach, we kind of looked back on the season. We're like, yep, that kind of makes sense that our drop jumps that week were low, or hey, it kind of makes sense that we dropped that game based off our travel schedule, all that, and that's fine. But retroactively, we can kind of zoom back and be like, all right, now what are we learning from it? What can we do better next year? Which again, when you have people who are even that eager to do that step, even after winning a championship, they're like, okay, what's the next thing? What do we have to work on? Because again, we have a lot of new players this year. So it's a different team, it's a different system, it's different normative data. What we used last year when it came to planning and programming is very different because, hey, a lot more teaching probably this year than what we did last year because last year we had a lot that were in the system for a while. There's a lot of new people. So, hey, what does that look like? Well, from a nerd objective loading standpoint, density is probably going to be lower because we're going to have to do a lot more teaching. Cool. Does that mean we need to go longer with our practice to be able to still achieve what we need to? And that's where right now, just working with Jeff and Jamie and all that, as they do some positionals as we ramp up, like, hey, they're working very technical stuff right now in smaller groups. For that to change, less people, maybe more intensity than what they think compared to when the whole team's together. So again, there's so many, like we talked about earlier, contextual details that need to be included that's where I think KINEXON / any type of monitoring kind of helps just objectify the process. And again, allow you to be reactive when you need to, of being like, oh, that's what that kind of session looks like now that we have these kind of players and this kind of system. Cool. Let's learn from that. What are we going to do next? Cool. Let's do it again. What do we learn from it? And so on and so on. That way we can know, is the training that we're doing working? Is the training that we're doing what we plan to do? All these things that we've already talked about.
Yeah. No, awesome. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. As I said, I could go on for a little bit here. I have a couple more questions in my head, but now I really appreciate it. A lot of great insights for me personally as well. I hope also for everyone who listens in. And yeah, I really enjoyed the conversation. Maybe we can do this some point again. And yeah, once again, thank you, Scott. Appreciate you taking the time and joining us here on the Xtra Edge, our KINEXON Sports Podcast. Thank you.
Really appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.